More and more children are out of school, but parents don't want math learning to stop. They're turning to Mathnasium at home. Real-time math instruction tailored to your child's exact educational needs. It's the same face-to-face live instruction used in our centers for over 15 years, now on a computer. Your child can keep their math skills sharp, catch up, or soar ahead, from home or anywhere with an internet connection. To learn if Mathnasium at home is right for your child, visit mathnasium.com/at-home. Mathnasium at home, changing lives through math.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to Mathnasium Schoolhouse. Lovely to see you all here already saying hello in the comments. I love to see that. For those of you that are new, welcome here to the first time. Maybe it's the topic that attracted you. Maybe you've heard about Mathnasium Schoolhouse and you're just in the mood for some extra math during your day, which is exactly what we're super excited to bring forward to you today. For those of you that have been with us from the start, thank you once again for joining us. Lovely to see some of the same names coming and saying hello. It's especially wonderful to see you guys helping each other out along the way during our lessons. So thank you always for that. If you guys would like, please also share with us what grade you're in if you are a student, if you're a parent or a teacher. Also share some background information with us. Look at all those smiles. That's wonderful. So of course today we're going to be looking at some more problem solving. And when I say some more, I mean that on Monday and what was it? The last 2 days? Sorry, it's already Wednesday. Oh my goodness. Monday and Tuesday we were looking at problem solving, but we were doing that with fractions. Today, as you can see in the title for the lesson, we are looking at percents. So for those of you that might be a little bit easier, for others that might be a little bit more challenging, whatever brings you here, hopefully at the very least, you do have some practice with percents. That's always, for those of you asking, it is most appropriate for probably level 7 and up. Like I said, hopefully you've already had some practice working with percents, because here we're taking it a step further, looking at some word problems, interpreting them to know what math we have to do to find that answer. Okay? And as always, these are our Mathnasium Schoolhouse lessons. If you need some of those prerequisite skills, make sure to reach out to your nearest Mathnasium, whether it's instruction on in the center or using our Mathnasium at Home program. We'll definitely make sure that you have the right skills in place to then tackle these problem-solving questions, all right? So here, the purpose is to just go through a list of problems. Again, for those that just want some extra math in their day, which is wonderful. Yeah, your friend is going to join. I love to hear that. If you have any of your friends at Mathnasium, please share. And please share this stream as well for more friends to join. That's always a wonderful result of these lessons, right? Helping more students out with their math. What a beautiful idea. So let me go ahead and let's start, right? We're all anxious to start. Let's go ahead and start. So problem solving with percents. Now this is part of a series, so there is a part 1 and a part 2. Tomorrow is the second part. So today we'll do some of those more, I'm going to say basic. They might be so advanced for some of you. Again, it really depends on what you've worked on in the past. It'll be about half an hour, and then we'll just continue where we leave off from today. We'll continue that tomorrow. Again, building on what we look at today. So let's get started. The way that I'm going to do this is I'm going to show you an example of probably one of the most basic problems we can encounter. Hopefully you can follow along there. If you're good, we'll move on to the next one. If you kind of get stuck, your best bet is probably to turn to, Larry did a video, a schoolhouse lesson for us weeks ago. Your best bet is probably to turn to that one, revisit that lesson, and then come back here. So let's take a look at a problem where we're going to call this a problem where we're looking for the part. So we're trying to find the part, and we'll see what that means. We'll see what that means in the example, right? So we're taking a look at a problem-solving question where we're finding the part. So I'm going to pose a problem, and this problem says that John, anyone, received 35%. Sorry if I don't use full sentences here. I want to make sure that I have enough room for the solution here. So John received 35% of votes. Maybe he was in trying to get onto the school council, anything like that. or who knows what he was trying to get on, right? 35% of the votes, and there were 200 people that voted. 200 people voted. So I'll keep this on right now. This is just an example. It's not part of our follow-along activities just yet. We'll get to those in just a second. Let's follow along with this example first and foremost. So the question is, if John received 35% of votes and there were 200 people altogether that voted, how many votes did he get? I don't want to know what percentage of votes. I want to know exactly the number of votes that he got. So take a minute to think about what you might do there. And the approach that we'll take is to first write this down as a word equation. Okay, we're definitely going to be creating an equation out of this information. So we'll create a word equation first. Once we're confident that that's exactly what the problem tells us to do, we'll translate that into a percent equation. Once we know that we're confident in how we've translated that, we're going to find the answer. Okay, I see some of the answers popping up. The person under the account of Echo, remind me what your name is. I know that you've been with us before. I'm happy to see you here. You got the right answer. So go ahead and share your name. Okay. But yeah, so we are going to get the answer that is appearing in the comments. I'm not going to call it out just yet, but let's see how we would do this. And for those of you that did get the correct answer, how about you help me out here? What is the word equation? And once we have this, I will erase the problem itself. What can I say here is the word equation? I have the problem that was posed to me, right? Maybe I heard it somewhere. My friend asked me this question. Now I'm going to start to think mathematically. I'm going to think, what is the word equation that's coming out of this problem here? Darren, great job. Good job. So one thing that I might ask myself is, okay, so this is about John, but I can just make this a math question and asking myself, 35% of 200 is what number? I've completely eliminated the situation. There's nothing about votes. There's nothing about John. There's strictly the math information, which is 35% of 200 is what number? Okay, so I'm going to write that down here. And I might not have room. I'll just say is what. If you're writing a full sentence there or a full question there, you might say is what number. Okay? So that's my word equation, which means I'm confident, and if you guys are too, give me a thumbs up. I'm going to erase this problem. I'm now working with this math problem. 35% of 200 is what? And again, you guys are getting it, which is wonderful. So now let's translate this word equation into a percent equation. And we don't have to do this all the time. This is really for those of us that are seeing these types of problem-solving questions for the first time. So how can I translate this into a percent equation? So think of an equation itself, some of what you're most used to. How would I translate that? Okay. And that's where I could possibly bring in a decimal, okay, if that's easier for us to compute. And again, whatever way works best for you, definitely share. Oh, I see something popping up. Okay, so what if I wrote something like this? And I'm just going to use the letter N for that number that we talked about. Oh, I apologize. It's not this problem. 35% of 200 is equal to N. Okay. And I see the comment that just popped up now is 35 plus 35. I'm loving that. So if you guys did, in fact, see this before or saw our Schoolhouse lesson on percents a few weeks ago, you know that when we're finding a percentage of a number, percent to us means for each 100, and because we have such a beautiful number here, we have 200s, we take 35 for every 100, and that's why the 35 plus 35 makes sense, to me at least. And that's why all of you who are sharing 70 as your answer, that's exactly right. Okay, so that's exactly right. So then I can write my final statement for this word problem and say, John received 70 votes. Yes, it was 35%, but the number itself was 70. Okay, so that's where we're finding the part, right? We had the whole, we found a part of it, the 35% of it. let's do two problems together before we proceed to the next ones. So I'm going to show you my screen here. So this is one problem. Take a few seconds to share your answer with me while I prepare my whiteboard here. So the question itself asks you, 15% of the apples in a barrel are rotten. There are altogether 400 apples in the barrel. How many of them are in fact rotten? I know it's 15%, but I want to know exactly how many apples that is. Give that a few seconds to try that out on your own. And then we'll move on to one more problem, and then we'll move on to different other types of percent problems. Okay? For those of you, and again, I'll just kind of go into detail on this one, but for those of you that are really fast with this, don't worry about it. I can visualize for myself a barrel, right? Let's see if I try to draw a very, very basic barrel here. I have 400 apples, that's what I'm told. Okay? But 15% of them, I don't know, maybe the top here, 15% are rotten. So maybe I just want to throw them out, or I want to feed, maybe they're not too rotten and I want to feed them to an animal. Who knows, right? Or use them as compost. So you guys are saying the right answer. I'm seeing it, yes. I'm not going to call it out just yet, for those of you that are still thinking. But yeah, I want to find 15% of this bigger number, right? I'm finding the part. So if I wanted to write my word equation, I would say, well, 15%, whoops, let's bring that a bit lower here. 15% of 400, and I'm just going to say is what? What you would say maybe is what number? And if I translate that to a percent equation, I like the or the caps for rotten apples. I know, not good. If I translate that to a percent equation, I could make that into a decimal. I'm just using this information that's given to me. And I multiply that by 400. And I say that's equal to some number. And you guys are telling me the right number. Let me use my green for that. You guys are telling me it's 60. And I'm going to assume that you used our Mathnasium way, Larry's way of finding percents. And you saw, we're dealing with a really nice number here, 400s. I take 15 for every 100, which means 15 plus 15 is 30, plus 15 is 45, plus 15 more is 60, and that's exactly right. Perfect. Let's do one more before we proceed to another type of problem. So I'm going to share the next problem here. Take a few seconds to think about that one. You don't have to break it up into a word equation, a percent equation if you don't need it. I'll give you a few seconds to try that out. Right. I'm going to start it off. I'm going to start off my word equation. Let me actually read the problem out first here. 30% of the people surveyed like a new movie. 300 people were surveyed. How many people liked the movie? Well, if 30% of the people liked the movie and there were 300 people altogether, I'm pretty confident I know how to do this. So 30% of 300 is what number? And if I bring that as a equation itself to solve, I could just use this the way it is. I don't have to necessarily write a percent equation. For those of you that think better that way, you might decide to write, okay, this, and hopefully you're not turning to long multiplication to perform that. Again, we have a beautiful number we're working with, and I see the answer appearing. It is 90. All right, because 30, or going back here maybe, 30 plus 30 plus 30, because again it's 30 for every 100, is 90. Beautiful job. All right, I am going to go back to my whiteboard here, and we're going to look at other types of problems, which in this case we're looking for the whole. So we found the part. Let's look at problems where we have to find the whole, and then we'll do some more problems together. Okay, So this is not part of the follow along worksheet that was shared with you. Let's just do this one together, and then we'll look at the problems on that page. So we just finished questions 1 and 2 on that page. We're going to do 3 and 4 in just a second. So let's say that this time, let me write this. Now we're finding the whole. There's other types of percent problems you might encounter. All right. So let's say, let me choose a name here. Let's say I'm saying Anu. Okay, I'm going to use that name. Why not use a student that's joining us today? So we'll say Anu received 45% of votes, okay? But this time we have other different information. We have that Anu got 90 votes. And we want to find out how many people voted. So whereas in the previous questions, we always knew how many people altogether voted, this time we know how many that percentage is equal to, but we want to know the total number of people. Rough. Yes, I apologize. My dogs get excited for math. So let's say I want to find the word equation here again. So help me out here. Let me remove this from my whiteboard so I have more space by first writing a word equation. Who wants to help me out? How can I translate this to a word equation? I have 2 dogs. So whereas in the other case we were always multiplying to then find the result, here we're going to say, well, it looks like 45% of something is equal to 90. So I can write that as 45% of what, let's see if I can squeeze that in, is 90. So that would be my my word equation, which means I don't need to know anything about Anu anymore. I've just kind of written that now as a math problem. I can go deeper if I want to and write that as a percent equation. I'm not going to bother writing equation. And I'm going to translate that to be, well, I could write it as, and I'm going to use the symbol here. And you guys are sharing with me the right answer. I'm curious to know how you got it. Okay. So I found that, or I've translated that information to say 45% of some number is 90 because 45% of the votes that Anu got was actually the same as saying she got, he or she got 90 votes. 200 is the correct answer. I'm going to get to that in just a second. Curious to know how you guys got it. If you want to use our Mathnasium way, Larry's way of looking at percents, we can say, well, since we know percent means 4 every 100. If I got 90, there is a beautiful relationship between the numbers 45 and 90, and I think I saw it somewhere. It is double, 90 is double of 45, so naturally I know that this will be 200. I think my blue marker is not surviving today's lesson. I'm going to put that to the side. But naturally, I know that this is 200 because 45 plus 45 is 90. So n would be 200. And I didn't have to perform any multiplication or division. All right? Or long multiplication, long division, I should say. So let's go to the PDF where I have the follow along worksheet. And we're going to work on questions 3 and 4. So let me scroll down on my view here. Okay. Again, if you don't need to see the word equation and the percent equation, don't bother. Go ahead and find the answer the way that makes sense to you, but make sure it makes sense to you, okay? Try not to memorize different strategies without understanding why they work, especially when it comes to decimals, fractions, and percents, okay, where we can easily get confused. So let's look at number 3 here. I'll read it out and we'll take care of it in just a second. Rest in peace, blue marker. Thank you. I appreciate that. 15 apples in a barrel are rotten. This is 5% of the total. My math side of my brain is already telling me exactly what I have to do. How many apples are there in the barrel? That should be plural. Well, let's see. So I'm told that 15 apples This is usually the way that my brain works. I say 15 apples represents, so I'm tempted to write equals, but that wouldn't make any sense, so maybe I'll put an arrow. This is 5% of the total. Okay? Translating that into an equation, I can write this as 5%, which looks like this as a decimal. That's another lesson for another day. Of the total, I can use t if I need to, is 15. And if you don't feel comfortable writing as an equation, you feel better thinking about it mentally with just the words, stick with that, okay? And how do I find my t here? I think some of you are sharing it. Yeah, for those of you that never saw anything like this in school just yet, it might be that you have to revisit Larry's lesson on percents. So I highly recommend that. This will be a lot more approachable for you, okay? I'm seeing the right answer appearing. It is 300. Again, you can look at the relationship between 5 and 15. This is just triple the amount. Using our knowledge of percents, 5 for every 100 means 5 plus 5 plus 5 is 15, which means t has to be 300. For those of you that resorted to division, which is another way of solving this equation, just make sure you understand why that's happening, okay? And again, we can look at, there is a lesson also, a schoolhouse lesson available for solving equations that you can look at there, all right? Let's look at number 4. Let's move on so we can tackle our other problems here. 25% of the people surveyed like a new movie. 100 people liked the movie. How many people were surveyed? So 25% of some number of people liked a movie. Great. We also know that that 25% is represented by saying 100 people. Whatever 25% of some number was, it's also 100 people altogether. So as a word equation, I can write that out as 25% of what is 100, sorry. I can write that as an equation if I want to. I don't need to. Okay? So I can use my green here and say 25% of some number is 100. And how do I find this number? Again, using our knowledge, this one's a really nice one. N is 400. Thank you, Cindy. Hopefully that's your name. Right? Because the nice relationship between 25 and 100 is that this is 4 times the 25, which means we take 1 for every 100, which means there's 4 hundreds. Okay? I'm going to repeat myself one more time. If that doesn't make any sense, if you're not following along with that, please revisit Larry's lesson on percents. That's where you'll definitely understand what I keep saying when I say for every 100. All right? All right, I'm going to go to my whiteboard one more time before we do a mix of these problems, and we're going to look at a third type of problem for today. We've looked at finding the part, we've looked at finding the whole. What if we want to find the percent, right? So there's different pieces of information we could be given, and we're just looking at another type. So what if we need to find the percent? And maybe what you can do after this lesson is start to think, in what real life situations would I have to find all these different types of information? Okay, so finding the percent. Let's say I gave you a problem. Let me choose another name here. You know what, I'm going to take Cindy. Let's do that. I just called you out on your answer, so why not use your name? So let's say Cindy received, let's write this down. Cindy received, we have a theme here, right? Voting. Cindy received 40 votes for something. I'll let your imagination run wild on that storyline. Cindy received 40 votes. 200 people voted. What percent of the vote did Cindy receive? So we're looking for the percent here. In the other cases, we knew, you feel honored, great. In the other cases, you knew the percent. Percents are used in taxes and sales, great. I like that you shared that. Where do you find Larry's lesson? In our library of videos on our Mathnasium Facebook page. You can find all of the Schoolhouse lessons, and in one of them you'll see some of the earlier ones, you'll see the percent video. That's a great question too. Okay, so how do I find the percent here? So really what I'm asking is I want to know 40, or let's even put this better. Let's write what percent of 200 is 40. What I was going to say earlier, but this is just probably more grammatically correct to write it this way, is 40 of 200 is what percent? But this is probably written better. What percent of 200 is 40? But you can think of it both ways, right? Because we're trying to find out the percent here. So, well, let's keep that. Let me just squeeze in the equation here. So I can say, if I want that percent, or thinking back to the problems we've done, if I want to find that decimal and then translate that over into a percent, I need a number multiplied by my total to give me 40. I'll let you guys think about that for a second. I see it twice now, 3 times. Okay, let's give you all a few more seconds to try that out. I'm looking for n in this equation here. What do we think? Right. So let's use our knowledge of percents, the percent definition for every 100. So I can say something for every 100 in my 200 number gives me 40. That's pretty much like asking myself, well, what's half of 40? It's 20, so it would be 20%. So Cindy received 20% of the vote by getting 40 votes. And you can double check that. It's always a good practice to double check your work. Is 20% of 200, is that actually equal to 40? Well, using our knowledge of percents, it is. 20 for the first 100, 20 for the second 100, 20 plus 20 is 40. All right? So let me go back to my PDF view here. Let's look at questions 5 and 6 together, which follow this type. There we go. So try that out for a few seconds. I'll read it out right now. There are 400 apples. Uh-oh, we're dealing with apples again. 400 apples in the barrel, just like last time, but this time we know that 60 apples in that barrel are rotten. What percent of the apples are rotten? If 60 of the apples are rotten, what percent does that represent? Okay, so the math side of my brain is starting to think, okay, this is the English interpretation of this problem. These are the English words. What's the math that I have to do here? So my brain starts to go, okay, again, I can draw a barrel if I really need to visualize it. I have 400 apples in my barrel. 60 of them, let's say 60 is up here, are rotten. So 60 of 400, what percent is that? And I can write myself an equation, and I can say n multiplied by my total gives me 60. And how can I possibly find this? Okay, so this is where you might decide to do some division. Okay, I see the answer appearing a few times, very nice, and I see some question marks around it. Curious to know how you guys got 15%. How about you share that? I'd love to know some of your strategies there. And maybe you just played around with numbers and saw what works, which is another great way to do it as well. Right? As long as you're strategically choosing what numbers you're working with. Is it too high? Is it too low? 15% is correct. So one way you might decide to do this is if you've worked with solving equations. I'll just show you this technique here if you have seen it. If I want to solve for n here, I can perform the division, or if you're not comfortable with thinking about this as an equation, go back to the situation. 60 of 400. That's the same as asking ourselves, What percent is this equal to? Okay. So one way that I can do this, and probably my favorite way, is just to reduce this and see what happens, right? And because I'm comfortable with moving between decimals and fractions and percents, when I reduce this, I get 3 over 20, or I should say 3/20ths as my fraction. And this actually helps me out because I know what 1/20th of 100 is. I know what percent that represents, which means when I think about 3/20ths, I also know that. This is 5%, 3 of them would be 15%, and that's where you guys are absolutely correct. 15% of the apples are rotten. Look at that, a beautiful explanation there as well. 10% is 40, half of that is 5%, or 20. Add the 2 and you get 15% and 60. Beautiful. There you go. Another one. Okay? I love when you guys help each other out with different explanations. If I'm going a little bit too fast, don't forget you can always come back to this lesson, pause as needed. Like I said, these schoolhouse lessons are slightly different than what we do with Mathnasium at home, because here the purpose is to go through problems. If you really want to go into depth on these topics, these skills, make sure you reach out to your nearest Mathnasium, and you'll have instructors that will definitely sit with you and help you out with these problems in depth, okay? Let's look at number 6 here. I'm going to scroll down right over here. Make sure we get to a few more mixed problems so we're not always told what we have to do. We make sure our brain tells us what we have to do, what technique to use. Number 6 is still part of that finding percent problem, so we know that we have to use that strategy. 300 people were surveyed and 63 of those people like a new movie. So what is that percentage? What percent of the people actually liked the movie? Well, we can jump right away. We know that 63 of 300 people liked the movie. If you don't like thinking about it as fractions, you can write it down as exactly what I said. 63 of, what did I say, 300, right? So how would I find this? Let me go to the comments so I don't lose you guys. (63 of 300). So one way that you can do this is simplify this. And if I do that, let's use my green marker. If you guys have to leave, no problem. You can always come back and watch the rest. 21 over 100. Now, if I want to translate this, and I didn't have to write it as a fraction, right? I could have just said 21 of 100. I divided both sides by 3. This is, of course, 21%. If you have to do the division to get your decimal and then move that into a percent, that's another technique. Just make sure you understand why you're doing that. If you're solving an equation, that makes sense, right? You've just created an algebraic statement and you're solving for it. Perfect. Let's just do maybe 2 more problems and I'll let us all go. 2 or 3, let's see. Let's see how fast we can do this. Let's jump to number 7 here. So I am told, let's say number 7 and 8. Let me put those both on the screen, kind of. Let's do that. Is that better? Okay, perfect. The price of a stock increased by 25%. The old price was $250. What is the new price? Let's make sure I can see your comments. So how can I get that? So we had our, let's even write this as, we had our, you know what, I'm not going to say original, I'm going to say old price was $250, right? And we're told that the price of the stock increased by 25%. So naturally my brain is saying, okay, I had this old price, I decided to take 25%, or maybe not even me, right? The store manager, or sorry, it's a stock. So anyways, someone out there took 25% of this and increased it. So we know, first of all, our answer is going to be greater than 250. It's going to be greater by 25% of this. So my first step is to take 25% of this. Another way of thinking about 25% is a quarter, and then add it to that old price to get our new price. So how are we going to do that? Well, I believe there's a video on finding a schoolhouse lesson on finding quarter of numbers. There's definitely one on finding half. If you know the relationship between a quarter and a quarter is just a half of a half. So let's first take a half of this. So let's say this. I want to find 25% of 250. So that's the same as taking half of this and then half of that again. Okay? So this is going to be, let's do some mental math together. Half of 250 is 125. And what is half of 125? Well, you can take, hopefully you're following along here, half of 100, half of 25. You put those together, you get 62 and a half, or you can write that as a decimal, 62 and 5/10. All right. And then what are we going to do? Well, as I said, the old price increased by 25% of it. So I take my old price, I add a quarter of it, and I get my new price. So my new price is whatever, $250 plus $62.50 is. All right. And actually I have my answer here, $312.50. All right. Someone already shared with me problem 8's answer. Let's see. It is 200. Very nice. So let's do that. If you guys need to see that solution again, come back to this lesson and pause. Number 8, it says 80% of the students voted for Mary for class president. 250 students voted in the election. How many votes did Mary get? So first thing you might want to do is decide, am I finding the part? Am I finding the whole? Am I finding the percent? Maybe that helps you really understand what you're going to do in your mind. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. So here, let's see, I'm definitely not finding the percent because I have the percent. I'm told 80% of the students voted, but then I'm also told 250% voted in the election. So I already know the whole. So it looks like I'm finding the part. So if 80% of 250 voted for, who is it, Mary? That's what I need to find. How do I find 80% of this number? We look at 80 for every 100, and then we realize that 50 is just half of 100, and so we need to take half of 80. And I saw one of my helpers shared in the comments the titles of that previous schoolhouse lesson with Larry. That's exactly where this is stemming from. That's where you'll find more problems to work with on finding this answer, but that's where we got 200. Thank you everyone for sharing that one. Let's do maybe the last two on this page, and you'll have 2 more pages of practice left for you guys afterwards. So let's do 9 and 10, and then we'll be done for today. If you have to hop off, not a problem. Number 9, we have the number of students at a school decreased. So our new answer is probably going to be less by 10% from last year. Oh, sorry. So we're looking for, this year there are 648 students. So how many students were there last year? So our answer is actually going to be higher because we already know how much that increased amount is. Okay, so let's see. So this year there are 648 students. So maybe you might want to start there. Let me make sure I'm looking at the comments here. So let's see here. So I have 648. What does that equal to? Well, that's the number of students for this year. Okay. Last year, let's bring in some variables here. I had some number of students. Okay. And I'm going to, whatever that number is, I would have subtracted 10% of it. So up to you if you want to write it this way or if you want to write it out as a word equation first. That's definitely a very nice strategy there. I see someone is sharing the answer. Beautiful. Okay. Yes, we are almost done. And so here is where you would use maybe some of you have already looked at solving equations and you understand what you want to do here. Maybe you want to isolate for the variable. Okay, don't worry if you've never seen this before. Other way might be that you play around with numbers that work here. Okay. So there are different techniques here, but what I really want you to take away from here is this one can be a little bit tricky when you're reading the problem, right? So you had some number of students last year, then for the next year it decreased to 648. How much did it decrease by? 10% of that number. Okay? And so if you solve this in whatever way makes sense to you, again, if you need assistance there, reach out to your nearest Mathnasium. We should get 720, and you can confirm that by taking 10% of this and subtracting it from 720, and you'll find that you get 648. Okay. Let's do number 10 and we'll be done for today. I'm going to erase this. What does number 10 tell us? Well, it tells us that 450 people started the marathon. That's a lot of people running. 180 people finished the marathon. That's not as many people that finished, but that's not the point. They started and they tried. That's most important, right? What percent of the people finished the race? So here, it's pretty obvious what we're looking for, and I say that because the question itself tells us we're looking for the percent. So what percent am I looking for? Well, I'm looking for 180 of 450. And here's where I'm going to say what I said earlier is there are different ways that you might want to solve this. Some of you might want to treat this as a fraction, reduce it. Some of you might jump to the division right away. Others might create this equation here and use our definition of percent. Okay, so I'm going to give you the answer here. If you want to come back and try to use your technique to verify the answer, you'll get either decimal 4, depending on how you solve it, or 40%, which is, don't forget, the question's not asking for the decimal, it's asking for the percent. So always make sure you're always answering with that right. That right, whether it's a unit for another problem or it's the percent or the fraction or the decimal that the problem's requesting of you. Sorry, I just read Cindy's comment and that made me giggle. I'm glad you feel like a genius. That means that you've maybe seen this before or you've practiced enough, or it's just something that you naturally understand, which is wonderful. And for those that maybe felt a little bit challenged here, that's all right. That's the beauty of math with practice. There's a lot of practice in the document that's shared with you. They're mixed problems, so you really have to start to think, which type of technique am I using here? Join me all tomorrow for part 2 of this series. We'll review some of these, but most importantly, we'll look at more complex percent problems. I hope you're looking forward to it. If you need to review some of our past lessons, please go ahead and do that. Please share this with any of your friends or family members that you think would benefit. I will see you all tomorrow. I'm looking forward to it. I love these parts of my days. Enjoy, practice, and we will see you tomorrow and later this week. Bye-bye.
It's afternoons that seem to be the most hectic for us, so it was much more convenient when we found Mathnasium at home.
All right, so how do we do half of 5? I think one of the best things about at home is that it really feels like you're almost at home with the student in their house teaching them.
I'm in my comfort zone.
You can just ask for help and the instructor will come right to you.
With Mathnasium at home, I know that they're getting the help that they need.
Awesome, great job.
Mathnasium, changing lives through math.